Do you have what it takes to provide the HR leadership your organization needs as it exits the COVID pandemic? In case we haven't met, my name is Francis Wade, and welcome to the webinar tonight on the topic of HR leadership, how to ensure HR's post-pandemic relevance or relevancy. And tonight we're going to welcome Joan Underwood. And if we haven't met, you may not know that I am the founder of CaribHRForum, and I'm the host of our online network along with my wife and colleague, Dale Pilgrim Wade. She's watching somewhere in the background. But if you're hearing me tonight, as you know, we start off with just a little bit of saying hello, and I can see the hellos already started. Hi, Joy. Hi, Nasroon. Hi, Lynette. Just put a little note in the chat. And if you could find, if you're from not from Jamaica, not from Trinidad, but you're from somewhere else in the region, go ahead and drop a flag in the chat while we are just getting everything started here. So back to our motivating question. Do you have what it takes to provide the HR leadership that your organization needs as it exits the pandemic? As you probably know, these are very strange times. And the kind of leadership that your organization required in the past is not the kind of leadership that it requires in the future. And today, with the help of Joan Underwood, we're going to be talking about the kind of leadership that your organization has probably never seen before from its HR professionals. And that's true across the region, because HR is in demand and HR is now stepping up into roles and doing things that's just not ever been done before. Certainly there's no pandemic that any of us can remember, right? Okay, so our timeline for tonight is, once you get past me and the introductions, we'll introduce Joan. She'll do a Q&A, and we will be going until approximately 8. There'll be a break at 7:15 or thereabouts. But we'll be going until 8 Jamaica time, 9 Trinidad time, and we'll be having an open networking session. And what Joan will be doing is that she'll be providing a couple of questions for us to meet each other with and to discuss. So once again, this is a great opportunity to meet other HR professionals from across the region. And let me see who else has showed up. Karen, Davina, Deidre, welcome. Nasroon. If you're listening on, and in terms of where this is all leading, the work that we're doing here at CaribHRForum, you may not know, in case you don't know, we are heading to our conference in September 16th to 18th. As you know, this is our second iteration. We had an amazing conference last year with over 1,300 people registered, 70 odd speakers. It was on a scale that the Caribbean really hasn't ever seen. From mostly 90% were our own people. And if you want to join CaribHRForum, you can go to CaribHRForum.com. Has a lot of information. But I want to tell you also about the webinar that's coming up in 2 weeks' time on the topic of gamification. If you think gamification is playing dominoes on a Friday evening or sports day or any of those kinds of things, it's not. Gamification is a highly engaged form of interacting with and intervening with your staff, your customers. It adds an amazing dimension to all kinds of training. So it's a secret ingredient. Some companies are using it without even knowing it. They don't even know there's a name for some of the things that they're doing. But come to the webinar in 2 weeks' time. I'm doing it with another professional, and she is a professor at UTech. And she and I will be conducting that webinar in 2 weeks' time. I'm going to drop her name in the chat once I fully remember her last name. First name is Lisa. And CaribHRForum.com if you want updates on what we're doing. From week to week, there's a lot of activity between now and September 16th to 18th. Make sure you don't miss a thing. And tonight we have a couple of sponsors. So one sponsor is a little bit different from anything you've maybe seen. Perhaps you may have noticed there's a couple of pictures that are behind me. In future webinars, I'll explain some more about the pictures. It actually is from an artist by the name of Heather Sutherland Wade. And she happens to be an aunt of mine. And you'll see links to her work in the future. just returned to our webinars, and we're here promoting some of the work that she does. It's really beautiful, beautiful work. That's a two-piece, by the way, that's connected, as you can see. And we're also sponsored by Mark Rim Compensation Studies. They have a compensation report that's available once again this year. They've sponsored us for maybe about 4 years, and this year they're offering once again a free download. So if you go to that link, Mark Rim Compensation Download, bit.ly, Mark Rim Compensation Download, you can grab a hold of their download, free download, which has a report on some compensation trends that they've been tracking here in the Caribbean. So if someone could put the link in the chat, I'll drop the link also in LinkedIn so the folks on YouTube can see it also. And tonight, let me introduce you to our speaker. So I'm going to say some, the usual fancy kind of things that you're supposed to say about someone who is so impressive. But I want to tell you some other things that we've discovered as a result of working with Joan. So Ambassador Joan Underwood is the founder of Underwood Talent Development Services. She's a purpose-driven talent development specialist who is guided by core values of accountability, execution, and professionalism as she carries out her organizational mission of serving small to medium-sized enterprises, governments, and regional institutions. She helps them develop high-performance individuals, teams, and strategies. Her professional designations include master trainer, professional coach, and certified change practitioner. You may know, Joan is the author of the Manager's First Aid Kit, a practical guide to remedy the 3 most common managerial challenges, and it came out last year. But beyond those things, I want to introduce you to a consummate Caribbean professional. As we've gotten to know Joan over the last few weeks, she's a very serious and committed Caribbean woman. I mean, there are a lot of women who are committed and they're from the Caribbean, but I think what sets her apart is her diligence and her seriousness about accomplishing big things. I put it that way, yeah, accomplishing big things. And it's our pleasure to introduce her tonight. And let me just tell you about some of the things that she has brought in her, let's call it her basket of goodies, because she has a few things that she is offering to all of us tonight. One of them is the access to a free electronic download of her book. So she's going to be asking some questions at the end of the evening. The first person to answer them gets a free download of her book, Manager's First Aid Kit. So take good notes. Also, she has just come out with a workbook, and almost come out with a workbook. The workbook is going to be published in September, and today she's launching it for the first time. If you purchase her book in the next 48 hours, and she'll give you the instructions on how to send her the proof of purchase, you'll receive the workbook for free when it comes out in September. The second goodie that she's brought with her in her bag of goodies tonight. And the third, there's more. The third is a bonus. If you stay to the end of the webinar, she's going to make sure that you get a link from her to download a document that she's written on managing your priorities. Okay, and that's a free download for everyone. Oh, I see some folks have discovered the emojis in the bottom right-hand corner. Excellent. So she's done all that, and I want to share one more thing with you. See if I can find it. Nope, I don't think I have it queued up properly. Nope, but I'll just tell you. I'll just tell you verbally before bringing Joan on. Actually, Joan, if you could make your way up, I'll tell folks that at the end of the evening today, they'll have an opportunity to see the replay of tonight's video. It'll come out by about Saturday. And at the end of that replay, there'll be a certification, like a certificate of participation that you can complete and actually download, put it up on LinkedIn, share it with your boss, show them that you are doing something of value while you were here. Joan, I'm going to hand over to you. Thanks again so much for being with us. And Over to you.
Thank you so very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be a part of Forum Network this evening and to be having what both Dale and Francis have promised me, that you are extremely engaged, extremely interactive. So I'm looking forward to that. So this evening, we're going to actually cover leadership on two dimensions. We're going to look at HR functional leadership, and we're going to look at your individual leadership as an HR practitioner. And we're going to start with the functional leadership in the first instance. So I don't know how you guys are. So I don't know if you were already involved in HR back in 2005. But in 2005, there was this very popular publication. And it wasn't just in the book, it was very topical, that people were complaining about HR and our not being strategic enough. So the name of the publication in question that I'm referencing is Strategic Business Partner. And there's a particular quotation that I'd like to share with you. And remember, this book came out in 2005. And the quote is, historically, many within the HR profession have lamented the lack of respect and acknowledgement for the services they provide. Now opportunity is banging at the door of every HR function to reverse that situation. The need to be more strategic and business linked is evident. So that was 2005. So let's fast forward 15, 16 years and see if, in fact, we have, as HR practitioners, stepped up to the plate and have become more strategic. And to get the answer here, we'll look at a survey which was done by HR.com in 2019. And you'll notice, thumbs up, we did in fact respond favorably to that call to become more strategic. And so by 2019, the story at that time was that 63% of the participants in the HR.com survey were reported as being high or very high in their level of alignment with the strategic business priorities. So from 2005, where everybody was complaining that we weren't strategic enough, by 2019, 63% of the participants were deemed to be high or very high in terms of their alignment. If you expand that now to include those that were moderately aligned, we're up to 90%. So, I mean, we can give ourselves a little round of applause, a pat on the back to show that we had indeed made significant progress. However, there's some bad news to go with that good news. So while we were more aligned, the HR practitioners themselves were saying, hey, we're spending too much time doing admin work, doing back office work. Look at this statistic. 82% of the respondents in the same 2019 HR.com survey, 82%, that's a huge majority, said that the lost time spent on this back office stuff could be better spent elsewhere. Now, that's not good enough, because when we have over 80% of the HR practitioners themselves saying, look, we could be adding greater value. So 2019, not where we needed to be, even though we were more strategic. And then guess what? Up came 2020. And I think it's indelibly ingrained in all our minds what happened in March of 2020. We had the declaration of a pandemic. And of course, the entire world shifted on its axis when that happened. And I tell you, for me personally, the thing that kept me sane was the serenity prayer, because the year 2020 started off with a bang for me. It was the best year that I had had since I'd launched my own firm. I mean, the demand for service was just fantastic. Between January and February, I'm based in Barbados. Between January and February, I'd made 3 separate trips to Antigua, all business related, included flying in on a Saturday morning to facilitate a retreat for a corporate client, and then flying back to Barbados Sunday night so that I could be at UWI facilitating a program first thing Monday morning. So I was ecstatic. I was doing work that I loved, work that made a difference, and really looking forward to a very rewarding year. Then came the pandemic. So I'm curious in terms of how you responded to the pandemic. And so I'm going to get Francis to help me out here. He's going to launch a poll. And this first poll will have you give us some information about your HR department and your state of readiness in the context of the pandemic. So Francis, over to you so you can launch the poll. So some folks figuring out sick leave. I feel your pain. We have a small minority, 3 out of 20, geared up and ready to go. Excellent. You can share your strategies with us as we get into the discussion. And the majority, just you've indicated that you have some good ideas and you're still working out the details, and that's completely understandable. So that's great. So Francis, go ahead and flip me back over. We are going to continue now. As I mentioned, we're going to start out looking at the strategy for the department, your strategy as an individual leader. And so there's a quotation that I love, and those of you who, because I recognize a few names, some of you I know already have my book, you'll be familiar with this quote because it's one that I've actually included in the book. And it's from Viktor Frankl, and he's a Holocaust survivor, also the author of Man's Search for Meaning. And he says, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And this applies for us as individuals and as HR practitioner. It applies to the HR function because we didn't go looking for this pandemic. We didn't ask for our world to be turned upside down, but it happened. And so now we need to pivot to be able to, give our organizations what they need in order to succeed, not just survive, but to thrive in this new context in which we find ourselves. So for the next several minutes, we're going to be looking at a 4-point HR action plan. All right, so it's 4 steps and we're going to go through each in turn. And again, I encourage you to weigh in as we cover each of the steps. For some of you who've said that you're geared up and ready to go, you may already be doing this within your organization. So just put in the chat and let us know if that's the case. For others, if you have questions in terms of how exactly would we be able to do that, just pop that in the chat as well, and we'll be happy to discuss that. So step 1. In our proposed new HR action agenda, take a seat at the table with the strategic business partners and help to reimagine the business model. So remember, when we started out, we looked at that book that was published in 2005, accusing us of not being strategic enough. And we ourselves were saying we wanted a seat at the table. So for some of you, you may already have that seat at the table. For others, maybe you're still lobbying, still advocating. If you haven't secured it yet, this is the most opportune time for you to make that compelling case, because I don't think there's any organization right now that doesn't think that HR is important, because there's just so much going on in terms of how do we continue to work in the context of this pandemic. So as you take that seat at the table, it's not just about being in the room, it's about adding value once you've secured that seat in the room. And how you add value is to either add your voice to the conversation if it's already going, or to initiate the conversation if it hasn't started yet, about reimagining your business model. So what do I mean by reimagining the business model? Now, prior to March 2020, if you had asked any Caribbean entity whether it's in the public or the private sector, about work from home arrangements. They probably would have told you that it's a perk that is reserved for a few, but it couldn't happen. There's no way that we could allow masses of employees to start working from home. Okay, and I see that I'm getting an agreed there in the chat. Absolutely. But guess what? You know, they say force make water go uphill. We had to do it. When we went on the lockdown, we couldn't say anymore, we can't do it. If we wanted our businesses to survive, we had to figure it out. So here's the thing. Once, you know, we get past the worst of the pandemic and we start opening back up in a really significant way, you can't then flip that switch back to where it was before and tell staff, no, 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 you can't work from home. Everybody has to show up, clock in, you know, punch the time card. So how do we reimagine the business to we already, you're quite right, Nazreen. We have evidence, we have proof that it can be done. How do we continue it in the post-pandemic era? It won't look exactly the way that it does now. So that's an example of how you reimagine your business. There's some types of businesses that just won't be able to go back. And I you know, we hear people say, oh, I can't wait for it to go back to normal. Folks, there's no going back. We have to create a new normal. So even if you think about things like FETs will never be the same again. So if you're in the entertainment sector, how do you reimagine how you do things? All right. So let's hear from some of you in terms of what types of businesses you're in and what reimagining might look like for you. For those of us in the education arena, just not as much face-to-face as before. I don't know that we will ever be there. I have one regional government that approached me and they said, we've been given a mandate to migrate our entire training catalog online. And, you know, so how do we do that? And so for those of us who are trainers, facilitators, you can't just take up the product that you deliver in a face-to-face environment and dump it online. You have to redesign, because training in a virtual environment requires a different design, different types of interaction. Okay, so yes, online coaching. Okay, I'm a professional coach. Francis would have mentioned that in the introduction. Now it turns out that I used to do most of my coaching online, so I didn't have much to do in terms of changing that. But what about all those coaches who were only coaching face to face, right? Now a lot of the coaching is taking place because of the pandemic. It's taking place virtually. Okay, so yes, there's no going back. So, you know, this thing about some people will define resilient as being able to bounce back. I reject that out of hand. There's no bouncing back. You need to bounce forward, right? Because there's just no going back. So any other thoughts in terms of other types of businesses that need to be reimagined? And folks, don't be shy about applying your mind to that, because if you want to be taken seriously, if you want as a function, an HR function, to be leading the organization out of this pandemic and into the post-pandemic new normal, you have to apply your mind to this. Online performance feedback, absolutely, but think bigger, because we're not just thinking about the HR function, we're thinking about the business model. What business is your organization in? If you're in retail and you have a brick and mortar presence, can you expect to continue operating exclusively in that environment, or do you need to go online? Do you need to also offer the option for people to place orders online, continue with curbside pickup? During the lockdown, we were able to pick up groceries at the side of at curbside. That's what I'm talking about in terms of reimagining your business model, not just how HR shows up. That's coming. That's not step one. Step one is about the business writ large. So I'm not moving on to step two until I hear some more from you. What business are you in and how can you reimagine it? Okay, so I'm seeing here hybrid of services that adjust to the environment. Let's get more specific. How do you adjust to pandemic and post-pandemic realities in terms of your business model? If we want that seat on the table, if we want to add value, these are the types of conversations we need to be able to have. So let's see what Tamara is saying. My organization is cultural focus, so a strategic role would be in the arena, but now our strategic focus is on technology. So technology as a tool for delivering whatever your products and services are. It's not that you become a technology firm, but you need to be able to have a conversation about how do we leverage technology to reposition ourselves so that we remain relevant in this new context. All right. So I see Francis is waiting, serving online customers. Oh, that went away so fast. Let me get it back down. Customers in this planning needs when they're used to in-person facilitation and engagement. Absolutely. That was one of the big projects I was facilitating the Prime Minister's office here in Barbados with their strategic planning initiative. And we had 2 face-to-face workshops. But a lot of the work that we did it via, Zoom. We did a lot of online surveys, filling out information in terms of our stakeholder analysis, etc. So you absolutely need to be able to reposition so that you maintain your relevance. All right, great. You guys are really jumping into the conversation now. So I apologize if I butcher anybody's name, right? Because I'm very nearsighted and this font is small. I am in the disaster management field. To reimagine our business, we need to utilize more social media campaigning. Oh, yes, as our community outreach and awareness activities are limited. Absolutely. So the way you communicate, the communication channels have changed. And because the channels have changed, your content needs to change. Because just as I mentioned with the training, you can't take face-to-face training and dump it online. Similarly, based on which social media platforms you're using, you need to create your content so that it's relevant to the platform. So if you're using Instagram, video is king on Instagram. So you need to be producing content that lends itself to that medium. So Vanoy, training, online training, improvements in information technology, recruiting, onboarding, online conference. Exactly. Great. So folks, this is what you need to be doing. Applying your minds as HR practitioners to the business that you're in. And you're not just in the HR business. HR is there to serve the business model. How does your organization make money? If you can't answer that question, you don't deserve a seat at the table. You need to understand how your organization makes money and how you can continue to do so post-pandemic. All right, so that's step 1. We good with step 1, people? So let me see some emojis there, some thumbs up if you have understood and appreciated the importance of step 1. Oh, that comment about editable documents. Oh, that is one that gets my goat every single time. Why put a form online if it's not fillable? So people have to print it and then fill it in and then scan it. We need to stop that. All right. We really do need to get ready and move with the time. Okay. All right. Selling your art online, having an online event to showcase. Absolutely love how you guys are thinking. All right. So I'm going to move to step 2. Remember, this is a 4-step plan. So step 2, now we've come from the business model down to HR now. So this is specifically what you need to be doing for HR in terms of HR functionality. And years ago, when I came up with this acronym, there were people who pushed back on me and said, oh, RIOT, get something else. And I was like, no, I'm sticking with it. I am saying HR practitioners need to start a RIOT. And this is before Disrupt HR came up, right? So fortunately, the times are catching up with me. So what's the RIOT? So it's an acronym. The R stands for retain. And what we're looking at as HR practitioners and as the business writ large, what do we need to retain? What do we need to improve or innovate? What do we need to outsource? And what do we need to terminate? Because there's some things that just won't be relevant in a post-pandemic era. You just won't be able to do them anymore. So again, as HR practitioners, if the conversation hasn't started, we need to initiate the conversation. All right? What do we need to retain? What do we need to improve or innovate? What do we need to outsource? And what do we need to get rid of because it's obsolete? All right, so Francis thinks that the CEOs would love HR to take the lead in rioting. So yeah, let's go. Let's start a riot. All right, Najrun, I see you like my acronym, so I'm glad I stuck with it so that you could have it this evening. So again, this is practical. We're not just here to just listen to me talk and, go away from it. Application, it's about learning. So let me hear from you. Let's think about the riot in your context. In your context, what might you need to retain? Because it's working fine, it's not affected by the pandemic. What do you need to improve or innovate? What do you need to outsource? What do you need to terminate? So for example, going back to the hospitality sector, restaurants, not much dining in. So one of the things that restaurants now might need to start thinking about, we need to outsource food delivery, right? We have our online presence. People can go online and they can order from our menu, which is available online. We can have curbside pickup. That's one option, but not everybody's going to be able to come to us to get their food. So we need to be partnering with other service providers so we can deliver. So that's that's a conversation that's getting you ready to be successful in a post-pandemic era. What are some other examples? Can you think of any function within your organization that's going to be rendered obsolete? Okay. Another example of something that you may need to outsource, cleaning, because with the various COVID protocols and youth sanitation and so on, if you're in the business of, so say for example, will be an example, retail, deep cleaning is not your forte. So are you going to then decide to add that to what you do? Or do you outsource that to people who already have the competencies, who already know what materials to use, who can meet the standard and guarantee that you will meet the standards that the public health officials have put out there? Okay, so the pandemic created the need for more virtual assistants. Absolutely, yes. Yes. And let me tell you, that for me is like the greatest invention since sliced bread. I have a team that they're dispersed throughout the region. We work on a gig basis. So if I have a discrete job, I will, call on them. So my graphic artists, I have editors, all of them are operating in the gig economy. Some of these people I may never meet face to face. I met them online. They responded to an ad. So my business certainly has already embraced that part of it. Samoya, we may need to revisit hard and fast policies that are counterproductive. Samoya, I'll take you one further and said, don't consider anything hard and fast anymore because we just are not operating in the same environment. So that's part of the riot. And the reimagining. Everything has to be on the table. And you review it to see, is this still relevant? If it's not, then you need to start preparing to come up with something that is. So that's step number 2. So remember, step number 1 was getting the seat at the table and reimagining the business model. Step number 2, you start a riot. Okay, so Vanoy, outsource new programs to improve delivery and training so participants can be more interactive, submit activities, track and monitor the effectiveness of training. Absolutely. So all the functionality it was already there because I was certified as a virtual facilitator. Gosh, it must be nearly 10 years ago now. So for me, fortunately, again, I didn't have too much pivoting to do because it was an environment that was already comfortable for me. But using breakout rooms, using polls, using the different activities, whiteboards, you have to learn to do all of that because, you need to engage people every few minutes in a virtual environment. And you guys know this because you do it yourself, because you will log in and be doing other stuff. Okay, so it's important to maintain that high level of engagement. All right, so let's go on to step number 3 in our 4-part plan. All right, so I told all you how nearsighted I am, so let me make sure I'm bringing up 3 and not 4. All right, so here we go. Step number 3 in our plan. All right, so for step number 3, we have to, having done our reimagining, having had our RIOT, we now need to look at the job functions that we have, because not all of, remember we said some of the functions are going to be obsolete, right? So in the context of this new business model, in the context of having had our RIOT, we now need to do some workforce planning. So that's step 3. And in our workforce planning, we need to designate job roles into one of 4 categories. And the first category is mission critical, or in some cases, they refer to it as strategic. I like mission critical because you don't have to explain what mission critical means. If you tell somebody, oh, that's a strategic job role, you know, they may not know exactly what you mean. But when you say that job role is mission critical, you know right away, if we are to deliver on our mission, that role is critical to our success. So the 4 categories, the first one is mission critical. The second one is core. So you know you have some core functions that the business won't survive without them. So hopefully HR will be perceived as one of those core functions. Then the third category is supportive. So the supportive job roles don't contribute directly to the mission. They're not core, but you need them to support the other things that need to happen within the organization. And then the 4th category is obsolete. As we said, if your business model changed, some of your functions may no longer be relevant. Okay, so Francis has weighed in. Case in point, at CaribHRForum, we are reimagining volunteers. So that's a preview of something that's coming. So you know the routine by now. I've given you the content. Step 3 is about workforce planning, designating jobs as mission critical, core, support, or obsolete. So think about your organization. Which roles do you think will be mission critical in a post-pandemic context? Which ones will be core? Which support? And can you think of any that should just go away? So volunteers are going to become core, all right? Yes, thanks for sharing that. All right, so let's hear from the rest of you. What's going to be happening in terms of your workforce planning? ICT officers, oh, absolutely, because so much now depends on your being able to be up online, have the stability, have security, because that's another one that may be critical in terms of cybersecurity, because you may never have even thought about that before. But with so much being done online now, cybersecurity becomes an issue. Great thinking. All right, Vanoy, I'm not sure what you've entered there. It looks, yeah, I'm mistake. Oh, okay, good. All right. So think about it, people, because when you go to the table, these are the types of conversations you need to. Risk analysis, absolutely. Risk analysis for sure. And risk analysis is not just for the financial services sector. Every sector needs to be analyzing their risk. Case in point, in Barbados, just the other day, we had an announcement that we were going to be opening up. There could be some feds. And then within 2 tours, the positivity rate spiked and we had to go back. So imagine if you had cranked up your machinery to open back up, whatever your business was, to go back face to face. And then in 2 weeks, within 2 weeks, you heard, okay, nope, we got to mash brakes on this one because you guys aren't behaving right. So that's a risk that you have to manage, because how do you spend money to get ready And how much money do you spend to get ready when there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to proceed? All right. Business intelligence analysis. Okay, great. You guys are really thinking about it. Excellent. All right. So coming on to step 4. And Francis, it's at the top of the hour that we need to take a break. Please remind me. Okay, Francis, if you're answering me, not until, okay, so I have until quarter after the hour. Okay, great. Did I bring up step 3 again? I told you guys I can't see small things well. So let me try this again and go for step 4. Here we go. All right, there it is. So step 4, ensure that HR is agile. What do I mean by that? I don't want to give too much away from the next section. All right. So I have to manage what I say here carefully. So you may have had some fantastic plans that you had developed and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into creating these wonderful plans and designing these wonderful systems, you know, your performance management system, your reward and recognition system, and let it go, because it's no longer relevant. All right. So that's what I'm talking about with the agility. You can't be anchored to what existed before. Your standard operating procedures, you probably have to go and rewrite all of them. Okay. So HR needs to be agile. You need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to realign yourself to ensure that you're relevant for what is happening within the organization. You also need to ensure that whatever you're proposing is financially justifiable, because unless you have been living under a rock, under the sea, you are aware that the economy has just, wherever you are, it has just taken such a hit. And in the region, so many of our economies are tourism dependent. So government revenue is down. The tourism sector essentially just went into hibernation, and all the spin-offs from that. So, I mean, even if you were from one of the most successful, wealthiest organizations pre-pandemic, money's scarce. And if nobody has told you money's scarce, just tell it to yourself, and then you show up with that as an underlying assumption that governs everything that you're going to do. So any suggestions, any recommendations, any proposals that you're making, you do not go to the table unless you can have a conversation about cost benefit analysis and where's your break even. And if it is, because some things that we have to do may be lost leaders. Don't wait for them to point that out, but lead with that. So this is not something that's going to be revenue generated. It actually is going to consume, you know, whatever percentage of our budget. However, it's imperative that we do it. And then you bring in, perhaps it's the risk analysis component that's driving it, or whatever the compelling why is, that they should allocate the funds necessary to implement whatever it is that you are recommending. All right. And remember that we looked at the 2019 HR.com survey and said that we were up to 90-something%, either good or very good alignment. Well, hey guys, we need to recalibrate because the business is changing. So we need to recalibrate so that we can get the alignment again. So let's hear from you in terms of this step 4. How can you ensure that your function is agile, that the initiatives you're bringing to the table are financially justifiable and aligned to the new business objectives, not the one you had before COVID, right? But the realities now that you have reimagined, you've had the RIOT, and you've done your workforce planning. So what are your thoughts? So right about now is when I'd love to hear from those folks that said, you know, we got it figured out. So tell us, what are you doing? Okay, so Dale Francis, can I get a verbal confirmation that you're still hearing me? Because I'm not seeing anything coming up in the chat. So is it that I'm offline? Oh, so it's not that I'm offline. So HR practitioners, and especially the ones in the poll who said that they're ready, what's going on? What are you doing? How do you ensure that HR is agile, financially justifiable, aligned to the new strategic objectives? All right, this looks like a question that we're going to take into the rooms when we start networking later on, Francis and Dale, right? To see if you can brainstorm and learn from each other. Yeah, that it is a meaty one. So let me just go ahead. COVID has ramped up the need for EQ. Absolutely. So let's talk about that. That's an exceptional point to make. I did something in collaboration with the HR Association here in Barbados a few weeks ago when we were celebrating International HR Day. And we looked at leadership development. Now, I've been making my living in leadership development full time since 2012, which is when I moved to Barbados to manage the Caribbean Leadership Project, which was funded by the Canadian government and covered, I can't remember now, I think it was 12 or 14 countries within the region. And we provided leadership development programming for the public sector, right? As I mentioned, I'm a coach, so I also have clients in the private sector who bring me on board for executive development programming, for coaching, etc. I say all that to say that it was a minority of businesses that were investing in leadership development in the way that they need to. Okay? And the pandemic, even though money is scarce, and I said that before, it's like a catch-22, because even though money is scarce, you have to prioritize leadership development, because otherwise your organization is not going to make it through, because this is not business as usual. So you can't expect your leaders to just figure it out on their own in terms of how do I lead in the context of all this uncertainty. And I'm starting to get into the second piece of the webinar, but we're going to get there in great detail, right? But now is the time to start investing or to increase your investment in leadership development. And HR, you need to be able to go to the table and make that case and be able to explain to them the right way to do it, because leadership development, the most effective way to do it is not to send your leaders on a training course, because they are not going to acquire the skills that they need through training. They need stretch assignments, they need coaching, they need mentoring, and they need to learn how to deal with all this uncertainty. And I'm going to give you some of that in the next segment. So let me go into the chat, because I see quite a few posts have come in since I last looked. So in my field, to heavily invest in training, as it is quite critical in disaster management. Yes, and we're in the hurricane season, so we have to have that on our minds on top of everything else. Training activities cannot be cut, since our core business includes sensitization of the public. We need to remain relevant in content delivery for all sectors. So you can't cut training, but how do you re-engineer it? How do you, so your content in terms of what you need to train may be the same, but the how of it, yes? You will need to look at how are we going to do that differently. And in terms of the financially justifiable, so Samoy, part of what you're going to be doing is making the case why they cannot stop training, or else there would be adverse consequences to it. All right, Vinoy, in strategically moving forward in a competitive advantage, ensure that organization can withstand any risk. vulnerability and use data in HR from large organization examples and stick to this new dynamic in moving forward. All right, so let's talk a little bit about risk, because something else that COVID ought to have taught us is that we cannot eliminate risk. All right, so when you're doing your risk analysis and you identify the risk and you go through, you create your matrix in terms of the probability of the risk materializing and the impact, the magnitude of the impact that it will have. There's some risks that you will be able to eliminate. There's some risks that you'll be able to transfer to others through insurance or whatever. But bottom line, there's some risks that you're going to have to learn to live with. And how do you live with them? How do you mitigate them? So all of this is part of what HR can bring to the table, having these conversations. And I'm curious, to what extent are these conversations already taking place within your organization, as far as you know? Okay. All right. Constant review of the HR strategy and the indicators. Yes. Oh, I am so glad that you mentioned these indicators. In the era of COVID, please don't be harassing people with any irrelevant indicators because you've been reporting on them from since 1900. Again, the information that you're providing must be relevant. It must be something that people can use to inform decision making. Oh, that got a round of applause with the irrelevant information. All right. Okay, reading a book, Awakening Compassion at Work. Oh, yes, Nazrun. I'm not familiar with that, but I'm going to look for it because right now I'm doing a really deep dive into psychological safety. One of my corporate clients, I can't remember if we started working on the project before the pandemic or after, but anyway, right in the midst of the pandemic, they had commissioned me to design training for all supervisors and managers. No, it was during the pandemic because people were at home. The people had already started working from home. And so this particular regional organization commissioned me through the Cavill School of Business, which is one of my strategic business partners, to design and deliver completely online a multi-module training program on employee engagement, and it was compulsory for all supervisors and managers. All right, so is that something that you have done? Because it's one way of managing people when you're physically together. It's a completely different thing when people are working from home, when they're dealing with the stress of the pandemic. Okay. Increased focus on employee engagement. Yes, exactly what I was talking about. And company culture given the remote context. And so it's in the context of designing that particular program that I started delving really deeply into psychological safety. And what I've realized is that unfortunately, many of our workplaces lack that type of safety. All right. So I'm glad you mentioned that book. Only learned about the term psychological safety recently. Yeah, Jay, a lot of people with that. So that's something that it's extreme. I mean, it's not new, but it has become extremely topical, right? And if we have time later on, I might give you a little brata and tell you a bit more about it because it's something that you absolutely need to understand and appreciate, and where HR needs to take the lead, not because it's your responsibility, but because the rest probably are not aware of it. And so you can be the one that brings that discussion to the table. All right, so a recap. All right. And here you have all 4 steps in the HR action agenda. And I put all 4 steps up for a couple of reasons. So if you didn't capture them in terms of note taking, here's an opportunity for you to do so. But it's also an opportunity for you to look at it critically and tell me what, if anything, you think is missing from this action agenda. I love a challenge. So you're on, I don't do operational HR anymore. So you guys are in the trenches. So you may be able to help me to strengthen my model so that I can beef it up, and it might move from a 4-step action plan to maybe 5 or 6 or 7. So what do you think is missing from this to ensure the HR function's relevance as we move past the pandemic? Okay, so Marisha, emotional intelligence, that's an individual leadership trait, which we're going to talk about that in the next segment, which is how you get ready as a leader. But absolutely, and this, I mentioned the importance of investing in leadership development, and emotional intelligence, fortunately, is something that can be grown. So in my coaching practice, I like to start the coaching relationship with an emotional intelligence assessment of the leader. So we see what the baseline is, and then we decide which areas we're going to focus on during the course of the coaching relationship so that they can develop and enhance that. So thank you for that. What's missing? And Francis and Dale, you can weigh in too, based on your experience. What else do you think we should be looking at as an HR action agenda? Donna, we're going to be talking about communication in the next segment. Yes, because as a leader, you absolutely need to be very mindful of how you communicate. So we're going to take a deep dive on that. Legislation. So the legislation can come in the context of when you're reimagining, you may find that some of what you need to do requires a new legal or regulatory framework. So I would put it to you that that's part of the reimagining of the business model. Okay, but if you don't think it fits neatly there, Rika, then I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name, then you can add that into your action plan. All right, research, performance management, talent management, and industrial relations. All of that must come in the context of what the business needs. So not just have headings, but how do you manage talent in the context of your reimagined business model? In the context of your strategic workforce planning, having identified your mission critical core, et cetera, et cetera. Business acumen, absolutely. You're not going to survive at the table if you don't have business acumen. But again, that's an individual trait that you need to bring to the table as opposed to an HR function, because all HR practitioners need to have that business acumen, need to have situational awareness. If you don't currently follow me on social media, I encourage you to do so, because on a daily basis, I put out posts that deal with these types of issues. So for example, psychological safety. Just before I came on this evening, I was writing a microblog about that, what exactly it is, and what do the leaders need to bring to the table to create psychological safety, and what the staff need to bring to the table as well, because both parties need to contribute to secure psychological safety. Okay, so Janet, succession planning, restructuring. So again, all of these are strategic HR functions. You have to ensure that they're relevant, because you may have had a succession plan before the pandemic. Don't assume that it's still good. You need to go back and redo it based on the 4-step action plan, based on the RIOT, based on the strategic workforce planning. Okay, and make sure that you're agile, that you can justify financially anything that you're asking the organization to do, and that it's aligned with the new business model. Okay, so I've been told I'm good to go. So again, in the first half of the webinar, we focused on a 4-step HR action agenda. This is for the HR function. Now we're going to transition to your individual leadership. How do you show up as a leader to ensure relevance and ensure that you are leading your organization in a way that will secure its viability and its success in a post-pandemic era? So VUCA. This is an acronym that many people didn't know about prior to the pandemic, but it's been around for a long time. We actually borrowed it in management from the military. And the acronym stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think we can all agree that we're in VUCA on steroids right now. The situation is extremely volatile, extremely uncertain, extremely complex, and ambiguity. You can't ask for anything more in terms of just not knowing what is happening. So again, we're going to check in with you to see where you are. So Francis, this is about the time when we have that second poll. The first poll, you will recall, was about the HR function. This role now is about your personal, your individual leadership. So Francis, over to you to run the second. Okay, Margaret, thank you for weighing in. All right, so some folks are answering in the chat. All right, so far, everyone who was responding. All right, so Francis, I'm still seeing the, okay, yes, the poll was still up. So I don't know what you can do on the back end, but I will proceed without it. All right, so again, now we're talking about you, how you show up as a leader. And so question for you. I'm going to ask everybody to weigh in the chat. If you're managing in a business as usual situation, so that would have been pre-pandemic, versus if you're managing in a VUCA scenario. So we're in the VUCA scenario now. So you're going to say, is it A, should you wait for additional information in order to make decisions, or should you be acting with a sense of urgency? Which is the appropriate leadership approach in a VUCA environment, A or B? All right, I see some B's coming in. All right, so Verlin, Najrun, Keisha have all said B, as has Marisha, Vano. All right, we seem to have consensus, but we haven't heard from the majority. Okay, so we have some more responses coming in. So I'm curious, for those of you who have said B, what's your thinking? All right, so Lynette is hedging her bet. She said, depends, but B in the most part. So, Lynette, when would it be A for you? All right, so Lynette, go ahead and type in, and the others as well. What's your rationale for selecting the answer that you chose? Okay, A would be when it's beyond my control and I can't make the decision or need more information. Okay, so Lynette, I completely get that, but here's the thing. In the context of a VUCA environment, you will never have all the information you would like to have. Okay, so Verlin says, although there's uncertainty, as leaders, we will need to act, do what can be done. Absolutely. If it's a VUCA situation, we may not have time to ponder. Exactly. All right, Deirdre, changes will happen whether you act or not. So the thing is, you don't want to just be dragged along in the process. So you need to act. All right. Yeah, still not getting my camera activated. Not sure what that is. Ah, there we go. All right. So change will need to be fluid. Exactly. So folks, in the context of a VUCA environment, You cannot just sit around waiting to get all the information that you would like to have, because there's too much uncertainty in the system. The things you would like may be unknowable. All right. So the majority was absolutely correct. So in the face of uncertainty, I absolutely get it. You want to delay until you get more information. And that's what you do in a business as usual situation. But in a VUCA environment, you have to resist the temptation. You can't get caught up in the paralysis of analysis because it's just too dynamic. Things are changing too quickly. So you yourself need to show up with a sense of urgency. And for many of us, it goes against the grain. It's not how we show up usually. Right? But this is the type of leadership that you need in a VUCA context. So that's the first one. We're going to do several of these. All right, so the next one coming up, and again, I present the. So I'm hoping you can hear me at this point in time. So the second challenge was whether you stay the course or you engage in constant updating. And I am seeing all the B's that came in. So Somoya, I hope you got the question repeated so that you were able to weigh in. Okay, so yes, B's down the line because change is inevitable. Absolutely. Yes, Jeanette, it's a dynamic environment, so you have to be flexible and adaptable. Okay, so you guys got this one. Absolutely. So let's just explore why this is the appropriate response. And we're going to do that by looking to examples of effective leadership. And I have 2 such examples to share with you. Okay, so you should have seen them come up in the chat. And because I think we're all Caribbean people here, the first picture, I hope everybody recognizes that as the fabulous Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley. So I don't know how familiar you are with PM Motley's leadership and how she has stewarded the country through this pandemic. But the thing that she did, and I'm so proud as a Caribbean woman, she led globally in terms of how she managed this challenge, constantly updating her understanding of the situation as it evolved. She took guidance, she took advice from the professionals, and she made no bones about it. She says, I'm listening to the medical people. She went on a very steep learning curve, okay, and was constantly updating herself. And she used the metaphor, and I alluded to it in the first half of the webinar. She talked about using the gas and using the brakes. Okay, so it's not that she laid out one plan of action and stuck to it doggedly, even though things changed. When the circumstances changed, she changed. And she made no apologies for that. And she told us plainly, I'm not afraid to change if that is what is required. And yes, Najun, she absolutely connects with her people. All right, so that was in 2020. Fast forward now to 2021, Joe Biden becomes the president, and you see he does the same thing. Remember when he first had set the target for the number of vaccines to be administered? Okay, and then the performance was better than expected. He didn't stick with the target. He came back and he said, listen, we're ramping it up. Instead of this, we're going for that. And so his people knew that we can't get complacent because we're on track to hit the target early. We've reevaluated and we've changed. So in a VUCA environment, it's not necessarily prudent to stay the course. You have to constantly update based on what's happening in the environment. Okay, yes, Jacinta Ardern, New Zealand, yes, she showed up as a superstar as well in terms of effective leadership in the context of the pandemic. Okay. And well, not just in the context of the pandemic. I mean, she's just awesome. Anyway, I'm a big fan of both PM Motley and Jacinda Ardern. All right, so let's try another one. Up in just a moment, you will see another choice for you to make. So in a VUCA scenario, do you downplay the threat and withhold bad news, or do you communicate with transparency? Okay, so by now you're on to me and you know that the right answer is going to be the B. Okay, yes, Janet, that's so important. Janet has brought in the issue of trust. If you aren't transparent, there will be no trust. So let's look at another example. And this example comes with a disclaimer because I prepared this particular aspect of the webinar last year. Since then, this particular leader has run into some problems. But let's not think about his issues that he's having with sexual harassment or some other issues that have come up. But think about Mario Cuomo of last summer, when New York was like the heart of the pandemic, and he was doing all those briefings, and he contrasted with the person who was in the White House, who was the exact opposite of transparent. So back in last summer, when New York was really suffering and struggling with the positivity rate and the deaths, etc., Governor Cuomo was communicating with transparency. He was giving, at the time, what we thought were honest and accurate updates. He was clear about what he knew and what he didn't know, what he anticipated and what was likely to happen if what he anticipated came to pass. But he always infused hope. And that's how I'm asking you to show up as a leader. Communicate with transparency. Be honest, including telling the people what you don't know. Okay? When you have information that you can share, share it. Okay? Talk about what's likely to happen, the good and the bad, and hold out that ray of hope that we're going to get through this. Okay, so I see Najrun, we have to connect with emotional intelligence, coach, and communicate. Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. And folks, empathy is an integral component of emotional intelligence, right? In my book, I talk about the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule. But let me see how well you people know your Bible. So who knows what the golden rule is and can put in the chat? What does the golden rule say? That good, sound Judeo-Christian principle, the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Yes, know it. So I put it to you, like I said, it's a sound Christian principle. But when it comes to leadership, and listen to me carefully, because I'm not going against the golden rule, right? Don't report me to my priest. What I'm saying is that when it comes to emotional intelligence, there is another rule that is more effective, more appropriate, which is better received by those we seek to lead. Okay? And Margaret has jumped in with it, and that's the platinum rule, which says that we should treat others as they would like to be treated. Why? Because everybody is not us. We have to take diversity into consideration. So just because we would prefer things be done a certain way doesn't mean that everybody feels that way. All right? So part of emotional intelligence is recognizing and managing our emotions, but it also includes recognizing and acknowledging the emotions of others. All right, so platinum trumps gold when it comes to how you manage your people. Yes, one more. And then there's a little something else I wanted to share with you too. All right, so this is the final example where you're going to have to vote on what's the appropriate choice. So in a VUCA environment, do you double down to explain your actions more clearly? Or do you take responsibility and focus on solving the problems? All right, and you know, of course, that is going to be B, because I already told you that all the answers in this set were B. So let's talk about why it's B and not A. So why don't you double down in a VUCA environment? So go ahead and put that in the chat when you can. All right, so assuming, what else? What are some other reasons that doubling down is not the way to go in a VUCA environment? The strategy may need to be fluid. Yes, sometimes doubling down can seem as though you're just justifying your actions. Exactly, Samoya. All right. It does not lend kindly to trust at times. Yes. And the thing is, in a VUCA environment, there's no single right answer. All right. So defending what you did is a waste of time. Listen, we have new information. So based on the new information, we're changing the strategy. Let's move on. All right. Lynette says in VUCA, resolving the issue is what is needed. Best to take responsibility and get things done. Absolutely. So what we have is an example of somebody. All right. So I was saying that Trump, and I chose this picture in particular because it shows how petulant he is. Look at this grown man, the president of the United States of America, arguably the most powerful person in the world. And look at, and that picture was from a press conference, one of the briefings. Look at, okay. So what he definitely did not do was take responsibility and focus on solving problems. He was busy pointing at any and everyone else and, just talking a lot of nonsense. So why are we having this conversation? Remember, this segment of the webinar focuses on how you need to show up as a leader. So please don't be a chump or a Trump. All right. We've gone through how you need to show up, how you need to communicate in the context of a VUCA environment. You need a sense of urgency. You need to engage in constant updating. You need to communicate with transparency. You need to take responsibility and focus on solving problems. Any questions, comments, feedback on what is required of you as a leader? Okay, so Curtis asked a question. What is the situation when you lack credibility? Curtis, if you lack credibility as a leader, you cannot lead. Would you follow someone who had no credibility? So if you're operating from a position where you lack credibility, you need to apply your mind to what you need to do to reposition yourself, to regain the trust that you would have lost. Okay. In my book, there's a chapter that's dedicated to trust. And there's a tendency for us to talk about trust as it's as if it's a single homogeneous thing. In my model of trust, I put it to you that there are 4 elements that constitute trust. And you can lose credibility, you can lose trust based on any one of the 4 elements. Okay, so I'll share with you what the 4 elements are. The first one is competence. People need to believe that you are competent for them to trust you. Okay, so if we look at Trump, you know, a lot of people, yeah, believed in him and thought that he could do no wrong. But a lot of critically thinking people did not perceive him to be competent. Therefore, he had little or no credibility. So that's the first element, competence. The second element is character, and I mean, of course, good character, so that you're honest, that you have integrity. Because if people do not believe that you are of good character, they're not going to trust you. The third element is benevolence. And benevolence is a nice old-fashioned word. What does it mean? That you wish people well. So if you're a leader and the people you're seeking to lead don't believe that you mean them well, they're not going to trust you. Okay, so the first three, competence, character, benevolence. The third one is what I call a meta component because it applies on its own as well as applying to the other three, and that's consistency. So you need to be consistently competent, consistently of good character, consistently benevolent, and just be consistent in terms of how you show up. You know, they have some people that sometimes when you interact with them is like, you know, they act as if you are their long lost best friend. And another time they go on as if they can't even give you the time of day. Are you going to trust that person? Because you don't know which version of them is going to show up on any given particular point in time. So it's important to know which element is missing or is compromised that has led to the lack of credibility, because the solution will vary depending on the element that's in short supply. So Curtis, does that help? All right, so I'm seeing a thumbs up. I don't know if it's coming from Curtis. Okay, all right, yes, he weighs in and says absolutely great. All right, so the last slide that Francis kindly posted for me, this is, you know, like my final chapter in terms of the leadership that you need individually. Right? In addition to everything that I've said about how you communicate and how you show up in a VUCA environment. Two essential coping competencies for you going forward are adaptability. And by that, I mean the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions, the capacity to be modified for a new use or purpose. Because by definition, VUCA that we're going to continue to experience change. So you have to be able to adapt if you're going to provide the type of leadership that your organization needs. And the second one is resilience. And by that, I mean the capacity to prepare for disruptions. Remember, you even start in some of the disruptions yourself. Remember what I said before about the riot. So you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable with change. Okay, you have to be able to recover when things go sideways. You have to be able to deal with the stress because it is inevitable. It goes with VUCA. All right, and you have to grow from every setback. Okay, and Najrun has pointed out that these are components of emotional intelligence. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we're on the home stretch now. So I've shared with you, Francis, you want to deal with this now or after they come back from their networking discussions? Tell me. Remember, I said there was a prize that everybody would get. So I'm about to place into the chat a link that you can use, everybody, including our two winners. If I can get back into Yep, here's Remo. All right, so this link, sorry, is to a complimentary download of a new ebook that I just finished writing. I haven't even launched it officially yet. So, I mean, you guys are really special because not even my subscribers have this one yet. All right, I'm getting ready to launch it shortly, but it's my special gift to you. All right, so it's a short one, but one that I think will be helpful to you. As you see from the topic, it's an alternative to time management. All right, so Francis, my goodie bag is empty, so it's back over to you. You're gonna send them off into their networking sessions. All right, so you see here all my contact details. So you can find me on Instagram at Joan Underwood. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Joan H. Underwood, or for my company's name, Underwood Talent Development Services. You can also find me on Facebook. I encourage to, if you have other topics that you'd like me to address, like I tell you, I, post every day. And I'd be happy to address any pain points that you might have, either a micro blog or the name of my blog is bi-monthly. It comes out on the 2nd and the 4th Tuesday of each month, and it's called The Manager Level Up. Once you become a subscriber, a member of my community, blog delivered directly to your inbox, but I also post it on all my social media platforms, so you can also catch it there. All right. You also have on this slide my website, me at www.utdsinc.com. And if you go there, you can actually request a complimentary consultation. So we can jump on the phone together. You tell me what you would like to accomplish, either for your organization or for you as an individual leader. And then we can discuss how best I can support you with that. So all the ways you can get in touch with me. And I really do invite and encourage you to reach out. I love what I do. Giving back, the work that you do as HR practitioners, it's hard work. There was a time when I did the type of work that you're doing, and I have to tell you, I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore because it takes a toll on you. So while I'm not doing operational HR, I am happy to support those of you who are doing it. So again, let me know what your pain points are and how I can help you with that.
Great. Guys, join me in giving Joan Underwood a big thank you for the work she put in to create this evening. I know she's been working for several weeks, months actually, to get to this point. And just please use the emojis for me and put in any comments in the chat to join me in thanking her for being with us tonight, taking us through a stimulating session. It's very different to be in the presence of someone who knows their stuff. The way you saw Jo just pick up, and when she dropped the 4 C's just straight from memory, I was, wow. So join me in thanking her for basically being with us tonight and taking us through her thinking and all the work and all that she's accomplished throughout the years to get to this point. Jo, you're really an inspiration to many, 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 many. So thank you so much.
And thank you for sharing your platform with me. And it's absolute pleasure and a privilege to be with CaribHRForum and to help, to develop capacity among our HR practitioners.
Great. It's been a pleasure having you. I'm going to have you back, I hope. I already have ideas for you, so watch out and wait till you hear from us.